Da 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 da. Welcome back to Disenfranchised. I'm Karen Bulinski Mathison, founder of The Naked Grief and creator of the disenFRIENDSchised podcast, where we reveal disenfranchised grief in each and every episode of Friends. We're diving back into season 2, and honestly, this is where things get a bit messy in the most relatable way possible. Last time, we watched Phoebe stand outside her father's house, paralyzed by the what-ifs. And this week, in episode 10, the one with Russ, we see the fallout of unaddressed pain manifesting in two very different but equally disenfranchised ways. So what actually happens in this episode? Rachel is officially over Ross. Or so she says. So to prove it, she starts dating. But who she's dating is the big question mark / elephant in the room. She's dating a guy named Russ. He's a periodontist who is, for all intents and purposes, a carbon copy of the one and only Ross Geller. Maybe he's not so one and only. He talks like him, he walks like him, and he definitely has the same "I'm a doctor" superiority complex. Though Ross is quick to point out that Russ is just a doctor of gums, the gag is that everyone in the group, including the audience, sees the resemblance immediately, but Rachel is blissfully, stubbornly unaware. Meanwhile, Monica's back with Fun Bobby. We remember Fun Bobby. He's the guy who makes every party better. But here's a catch to it all. The reason he's so fun is that he's always drinking. All of his stories start "I was so drunk that," or "one time we were drinking and." And when Monica realizes that he has a problem and encourages him to get sober, Bobby complies. The problem? Sober Bobby is, well, a bit of a downer. He tells long, pointless stories about bus rides and the price of ham, or how he walked through the village at 1 o'clock in the morning to find a hardware store so he could buy a hammer. So, Monica, unable to handle the dull reality of his recovery, starts drinking just to make his stories more tolerable. And in the background, Joey is wrestling with his own professional grief. After a string of bad reviews, one of which literally says he sucks, he faces a moral dilemma. Sleep with a casting director or get a part on Days of Our Lives, or to keep his integrity and potentially watch his career die. He chooses integrity, and in a classic sitcom twist, he lands the role of Dr. Draco Mori anyway. So now it's time to play Name That Grief, the substitution and identity loss. In this episode, we aren't looking at death grief. We're looking at the kind of grief that doesn't get a funeral, but it definitely leaves a ghost. Rachel and her substitution grief. Rachel's experiencing what I like to call substitution grief. She's mourning the loss of the Ross and Rachel dream that died when she read the infamous pros and cons list. Instead of sitting with the stinging rejection and the anger of Gel Boy, as she so eloquently puts it, she finds a surrogate. Russ is a human Band-Aid. By dating a man who mimics the person she lost, she can pretend the loss never happened. It's a way of bypassing the pain of an ending by creating a cut and paste version of her life. Monica and identity loss in recovery. This is actually kind of a sensitive area. It's a very unrecognized form of disenfranchised grief. When someone we love gets healthy, whatever they beat, an addiction, manage a mental illness, or just change their lifestyle, whether it's diet, more exercise, any of those things. We're supposed to be happy for these changes. Society tells us there's no room for mourning here. But Monica's grieving the loss of the man that she fell in love with. The fun Bobby's identity's dead. And in its place is a stranger who's healthy, but heavy. And Monica's mourning the loss of their shared vibe. And because Bobby is doing the right thing by staying sober, she feels like a monster for missing the drunk version of him. Now, this is where support systems can sometimes flounder or fail. The support system in this episode is kind of questionable. When it comes to Rachel and Russ, the friends do what we all probably would have done, at least in our heads. They point out the obvious with a side of mockery. They see Rachel spiraling into a substitution pattern, and their response is to laugh at the absurdity of Snarro, the alias of David Schwimmer that actually shows up in the credits. They aren't holding space for why Rachel needs Russ. Nobody asks, "Hey, Rachel, are you okay with how things ended with Ross?" Instead, they make it a joke. When we mock someone's rebound or their type, we are often dismissing the underlying grief that led them there. And then we have Monica and Bobby. The friends actually place a bet on how long the relationship will last now that Bobby's sober. Think about that for a second. Instead of supporting Monica through the difficult transition of being a partner to someone in early recovery, they turn her struggle into a parlor game. This is why so many people suffer in silence, because their support group is too busy watching the train wreck to offer a hand. So a coaching moment here is, what if they had held space? It would be a very, very different show. But let's look at the what ifs for a moment. This is where we can see the difference between carrying scars and finding closure. What if Rachel sat with the list pain? Imagine if, instead of rushing into a date with a periodontist, Rachel sat on the balcony and just felt the weight of being too much, or just a waitress in Ross's eyes. If she had held space for that hurt, would she have needed Russ? Probably not. But avoiding the sting, she landed in a situation that eventually made her look a little crazy to her friends. And when we don't grieve the ending of a relationship, no matter how short or how potential, we often end up dating the ghost of it until we're forced to see the truth. Rachel eventually sees it, but only after wasting time and energy on a carbon copy. What if Monica acknowledged the loss of Fun Bobby? If Monica had been honest and said, "I'm so proud of Bobby for being sober, but I am really struggling with how much our dynamic has changed," she might not have felt the need to start drinking herself. She was trying to fix the dullness with alcohol, the very thing Bobby was trying to escape. If she had acknowledged that it's okay to mourn the fun while celebrating the healthy, she might have found a way to build a new sober fun with him. Instead, she landed in a place of resentment, and they eventually break up because the new Bobby realizes that she's the one with the problem now. Healing isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's dull, sometimes it's boring, and we have to be okay with that. So some real life relatability, the rebound and the reality check. Many of us have been Rachel. Maybe you didn't date a guy named Russ, but maybe you dated a guy who worked at the same firm, drove the same car, or had the same weird obsession with documentaries as your ex. We do this because the familiar feels safe when our world has been rocked, but substitution isn't a solution, it's a delay tactic. And many of us have been in a Monica situation where we've seen a friend get healthy and realized they aren't as much fun to go out with anymore. Or we've personally achieved a goal like sobriety or weight loss, a new career, only to realize that the people around us are mourning the old version of us. It can be a very lonely place. And we have to give our permission to say, this is better, but it's also different, and different can feel like a loss. One of the things I talk about within my circles is about cognitive behavior. We have patterns, and sometimes we're so used to the familiar that we don't realize whether those patterns are positive or negative. But if you see those patterns, that's huge. So I only recently started to really see the patterns in the circles that I choose to run in, the types of people I choose to be around, and the kind of behaviors that make me feel familiar, not healthy. I surrounded myself at a very young age with people that did backward compliments and things. And you get used to that. So when somebody does show up in your life and starts actually speaking honest and direct, that can hit funny. So sometimes you've got to go backwards, recognize those behaviors from old, and learn how to fix and change. Um, it's hard work. It doesn't happen overnight, but there's a lot of things that you can mix in because once you identify those things, you learn how to tap them out of your cycles and tap in new cycles. It's a process. I've been going through it for about 2.5 years now, and sometimes I don't always land where I should. I am learning that I am bringing in new people. I am seeing new patterns start to form. Sometimes those patterns still aren't landing the way they should, but it's trial and error. Life is short, so rebuilding, regrouping, reconnecting, it all takes time, effort, and the desire to want to change. So if you're sitting with this right now and you're resonating what Rachel did, and you're going, oh my gosh, I always date the same person with either the same name or the similar name, or it doesn't have to be a physical type because we all do have types, right? But maybe they all have certain behavioral patterns that we've just gotten used to. And maybe some of those behavioral patterns aren't great. Maybe they like to argue a lot and we're just used to that. Or maybe they're emotionally disconnected and we think that that's good because we're not arguing. But who do you want to have show up at the end of the day when things start to crumble? That's your choice. So cognitive behavior is definitely something that you can look at. I actually go through some of that insight in more detail in the Grief Skills Lab. And speaking of, just to remind you about the naked grief, not all grief comes from death. Job loss, career pivots, divorce, breakups, empty nests, moving, identity shifts, friendships ending, the loss of the life you thought you'd have. At The Naked Grief, we offer support communities that meet you where you are without pressure, toxic positivity, or having to explain why it hurts. So next week, we're going to tackle the one with the lesbian wedding. We're going to look at the grief of the traditional family dream and how we navigate the milestones of people who have moved on without us. So if any of this resonated with you, again, whether it's feeling like you're dating a Russ or you're struggling with the dull reality of a life change, please know that your grief is valid, even if it feels small or silly. So visit thenakedgrief.com for resources on how to navigate disenfranchised grief and how to start holding space for the parts of yourself you're afraid to show. You don't have to carry these scars alone. So we'll see you next week. And remember, it's okay to be fine, even if you're just dating a guy with too much gel in his hair. Da 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 da.